Welcome to the Empowered Podcast, episode 15. Thank you for tuning into the Empowered Podcast. I'm your host, Ellery Wells, and this is the show created to help you develop, grow, and overcome the challenges that you are facing in your life. Before we get started today, I wanted to give a quick shout out to 2 new iTunes reviews that I've gotten since I last read through, and I'm really excited to be able to share those with you. The first one says, "Very effective" by Folgers09. Ellery provides quality information that just pumps you up. If you're out there and looking for a podcast, this is going to stir you in the right direction of effective leadership and personal brand development. You have found it. Check it and see for yourself. Thank you, Folgers09. The second great 5-star review says, "What a great show" by Dahava. In a field pretty crowded with interview podcasts, this one really stands out. It's professional, sounds great, and the host, Ellery, just comes across as a really, really likable guy. Thank you, Dahava. He also says, "I hope this one sticks around." I plan to. And he says, "I think this show is destined for the top of the iTunes charts. If you're on the fence about listening, jump in. You'll be glad you did." Thank you so much, Dahava and Folgers09, for those 2 5-star reviews in iTunes. They really mean a lot, and they really help increase the visibility of the show, which increases the number of people that we get to help with our message of overcoming the challenges that we all seem to be facing on a regular basis. If you would like to leave me a review in iTunes, you can do that by going to iTunes and searching for the Empowered Podcast. Make sure you put "with Ellery Wells" in there, or you can go to empoweringthe80%.com/iTunes. If you're a Stitcher user, just use /Stitcher and it'll take you to the show right there also. In today's episode, I share a conversation that I had with the man of value himself, Kirk Bowman. He started a speaking and consulting company called The Art of Value, and it's based on the idea that we should sell the value that we're providing our customers and our clients instead of just being paid by the hour. And I think it's a really cool concept. You know, if we're paying by the hour or getting paid by the hour, there's only 24 of those in the day, when the value that we could be creating for our clients and our customers and our coaching clients, for that matter, could be significantly more than just a $1 per minute or $1 per hour fee. And by looking at the value that we create, you know, we can create happier customers and make more money as well. So without further delay, we'll go right into the interview with Kirk Bowman of Art of Value. Thank you for tuning into the Empowered Podcast. I am here with Kirk Bowman of Art of Value, and Kirk helps people discover the value that they offer and help them sell that value to others. How are you doing tonight, Kirk?
Hey, Ellery, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. For everybody that wasn't at the Platform Conference in Dallas, that's where Kirk and I met face-to-face for the first time. And he was such a cool dude that I knew we'd already had the interview scheduled, but I knew I would really enjoy getting to talk to him on the podcast. So here we are. Kirk, if you would, tell us a little bit about your background, what the Art of Value is, and get us up to speed.
Sure. I've been self-employed ever since I was out of college, and the business that is my primary livelihood is a software company called Mighty Data, and I've had that business for 17 years. About 4 years ago, I changed the business model in that business. We had been billing by the hour, the way a lot of professional service companies do, and through my interaction with some other people at a conference, I learned about value pricing and did some research, and based on that, switched the business model over to value pricing.
And that sounded like it must be a pretty big shift because everything you see is dollar value, dollar value, dollar value. And so you said 4 years ago, so 2009, you took your software business and changed the pricing model on its head, right?
Right. So we went from pricing by the hour to having a conversation with a customer to try to understand what is the value of what we're helping them with, and then set a price that sets a fair return on investment for the customer. Pricing by the hour really is irrelevant as far as the customer is concerned, because they really, when it comes down to it, have no interest in how long it takes. I mean, obviously they want to get it quickly, but they're really not interested so much in how long it takes us to do it as they are getting the result that they want.
Which would be like a removal of a pain point or a solution implemented, something like that, right?
Yeah. So whenever you're visiting with a customer, they always want to talk about what they need. So in my business, that would be a piece of custom software. For an accountant, it might be a tax return. For an attorney, it may be drawing up a legal contract. Whatever the service or product is that you're selling, that's what they want. But there's a reason why they want it. In other words, there's kind of a question behind the question. So after I find out what they want, then I try to find out why they want it. So, for example, in the software business, they may want software because they're anticipating their business is going to grow 50% over the next 24 months, and they realize they're going to have to hire people or put systems in place to allow them to scale with the same headcount. Those are the kind of things that I try to find out. Also, the advantage of finding out the why behind the what is it helps ferret out how much you can help them. And quite frankly, I'm looking for customers who I can help a lot. I don't just want to help a little. If we talk to a customer and we realize we're only going to help them a little, we really want to have a conversation with the customer about, is this really the most important thing for them to be doing?
So it turns from a question of, okay, this is $100 to what else do you need? Because if I assume I'm not the only buyer that thinks this way, I'm going to go get item A from over here, item B from over there, where if you could package them together, save me running around, some of those things, it might be a better solution. Am I thinking along the right lines?
Yeah, bundling is what you're describing, where instead of just selling one thing, you combine several things together into a bundle. And that's a very good pricing technique. A lot of times you can tweak a bundle by adding something or removing something and actually be able to offer a customer more than one choice. But bundling is something that you want to look for ways to add value, to add things to what you can offer, things that actually the customer sees as high value. You don't want to add something that they don't value, but if you can find something that is really valuable to them, that it's something that is important, it's a priority, it's going to have a significant impact, combining that with the other services that you offer is a great way to kind of distinguish yourself.
So if someone came to you and just said, I'm looking for the lowest price possible, if I can save a penny with your competitor, I'm going to go over to them. What do you say to that kind of person?
Well, one of the things that value pricing forces you to do is it forces you to figure out who are the customers you want to work with and then qualify your customers. In fact, you need to qualify them better when you're value pricing, because generally with value pricing, you're taking on more risk with a customer, and so you're going to be more selective on the customers that you do work with. If I had a customer that came to me and they were just, bold like you described about, hey, I'm looking for the cheapest price, I would probably tell them what I tell other customers, which is, if you're looking for the cheapest price, we're not the match for you. We're not the least expensive. We actually value the process we've created. We, for example, in my software company, have a dedicated project manager. Not all software companies that are in our space have that. But we believe it's important. We believe it's part of what makes us unique. It's part of our process. We think it's a key ingredient for success. And so for that and other reasons, we're not the least expensive. And that really doesn't bother us because the customers we want to work with are not the ones that are looking for the lowest price. They're the ones who are really looking for the value, who are looking for high quality, who are looking for a company that's been around a long time, a lot of those things. So to be honest, usually those type of customers are not a good fit.
Yeah, are you familiar with the Foundation?
I'm not.
It's started by a guy, I think his name is Dane Maxwell, and he's been interviewed in a couple podcasts that I've listened to. And one of the things that he said is when you know your customer's problem better than your customer knows their problem, then the sale becomes very easy. And that sounds almost like what you're talking about. You have to qualify them and you have to know them better than if you're just doing hourly or something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Hourly, you don't have to learn as much about your customer. Although some people who bill by the hour do learn a lot about their customer, but value pricing forces you to do that because the only way you're going to understand what's important to them, what's going to create value, what is value from their perspective is by having a conversation, by asking really great questions and probing, learning how to ask question 2 or 3 different ways to see if you get the same answer, learning how to follow up a question with a second question to go deeper. Those kind of conversations are necessary. And so the more you know about your customer, number one, the better you can serve them, but 2, the better you can figure out what is going to contribute the most value to them. And that in turn is going to allow you to set a better price.
So what made you want to change your pricing model? Because on your page, artofvalue.com, on the about part, or on the about page, you said you were an advocate of the hourly billing, and then something happened to where you changed. What made you redirect?
So I was at an industry conference for the software niche that I'm in, and I actually organized a panel during the conference to have a discussion about estimating and billing practices. The irony is I was actually the advocate for hourly billing on that panel. There were 4 panelists. Nice. 2 of the other panelists kind of did a hybrid of hourly and fixed pricing. And then there was another panelist who was value pricing. And it was interesting. I was part of the panel, but I was really paying attention to what he said. In fact, there's one thing that I remember still vividly that he said that caught my attention. And he said, if you bill by the hour, there's an artificial limit on your income, meaning there's only so many hours you can bill. You can only raise your rate so high. At some point, you reach an upper limit. And I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I love business. And the idea that I was doing something that could limit my income didn't sit well with me. And so based on that, I actually studied value pricing for about 90 days after the conference before I made the decision to switch.
Now, would that be something like, you can only work 24 hours in a day if you worked every hour, but by doing the value, as you get more proficient and it takes you less time to do a task or perform a service, it takes you less time, but the value created stays the same. You're actually making, to use the word, you're making more per hour or more per project for less time.
Well, I think what you point out is the fact that if you bill by the hour and as you get better and you're able to do things faster, you make less money. Even if you raise your rate, I doubt most professionals can raise their rate as quickly as they improve at their craft. And so the idea of at some point you're actually making less for being better doesn't seem to make sense. And again, that didn't fit with me either. So I don't even think about how I'm compensated on an hourly basis anymore. It's just not a metric that means anything to me. I'm really looking at, okay, what is the value that we're going to create for the customer, and then what's a fair price for that value?
Now, and you also said that once you made the switch, you increased your revenue by 56% during the first year. The next year, revenue by another 80%. Those are pretty staggering growth numbers. How did you go about doing that? Is that a trade secret or something that you can give us some insight into?
No, it's not a secret. I was very fortunate, blessed that the very first proposal I did value pricing on, I basically had someone that was working with me to kind of help me think through the value. And based on that conversation, I doubled the price from where I was going to originally set it. And the customer agreed, and we did the project. So I had a really great win out of the gate. And based on that, it gave me confidence to pursue it with each new project. And so I started out doing it with new customers. It was later on, after I gained some experience, that I went back and doing it with existing customers. But I just tried to apply the principle of what is the value that we're creating? What is the result that we're shooting for? Try to quantify that if I can, and then set a price that was a fair return on investment. So say, for example, maybe 10 to 1 or 8 to 1. There's no set ratio, but that's part of the way I look at it. Simply focusing on the value for the customer. When you do that, I think you tend to set higher prices.
So how did those customers older customers, when you changed the billing model, how did they take it?
So there's 3 reactions that a customer can have when you switch to value pricing, and this is with an existing customer. They can either embrace it, they can either say no and go elsewhere, or they can embrace it at first and change their mind later. And we had all 3 circumstances happen. So we had one customer that we were billing hourly that actually came to us and said, we want to change this. We don't want to be billed by the hour. We want to work with you at a different level. And so we actually, how you price that engagement, and it turned out to be a great engagement, lasted about 2 years. We had another customer that we tried 3 different times to switch them. They never can make the switch. And so finally we said, you know what, we think you could be better served by somebody else. And so we made a referral to somebody who could pick up and work with them continuing on an hourly basis. Then we had another customer that made the switch for a project. And then at the end of that project, they started rethinking whether that was the approach they wanted. And ultimately, we kind of mutually agreed that it wasn't going to be a fit. So any of those 3 outcomes can happen. From my experience, the customers that we kept that switched were the ones we wanted. The ones who didn't stay with us were the ones that, quite frankly, weren't the best customers in our portfolio. When you're value pricing, one of the things that you can look at is look at the customers you're working with and kind of put them into groups, level A, level B, level C. And generally, the level A customers are the ones you want to keep for sure. They're your best ones. The C customers are the ones you could probably let go without thinking about it. It's the B customers in the middle that are going to be the challenge, because usually, they could go either way. And so just by thinking which category somebody falls into, it'll kind of help you begin to get an idea of who are the ones that you think you want to put your best effort into that would stay with you versus the ones where you're like, you know what, if this is not a fit, then we're okay if they leave.
So a lot of whatever the term is, wantrepreneurs or solopreneurs or people who are looking to build a business online, they were told, get a product. I think on the Fizzle show, Corbett Barr said, start with product first. So I created a product, one that I call the personal branding toolkit that walks people through Facebook and LinkedIn, resume building. And it shows you how to tailor those things to put the brand that you want out in the world out there instead of something that you don't want. And when I first created this product, I was thinking $7, $8, $9. And I put it up for promotion at, I think, $5 or $6. And I sent out some review copies to one in particular, John Harrison. I don't know if you're familiar with him, johndharrison.com, I think is his website. And he does resume writing and reviews. He comes back to me with feedback, and he says, what price are you thinking about selling this for? And I told him what I just said. He says, Ellery, you need to price it for way more than that. And he was thinking the $25 to $30 range because of the value that it would provide to other people with getting a promotion. What would you do in that type of situation, for me specifically maybe, and then for someone else who has created a product but maybe doesn't know where to price it at?
So a lot of the same principles that I use to price services, I think apply to pricing products. The challenge or the difference between pricing a product versus a service is, particularly when you're doing business-to-business service or B2B services, you can set a price for each customer based on the circumstances. Each customer perceives value differently, and the particular context for where you're trying to set a price depends on their perception of value. So it's very subjective. With products, you're basically putting something out there, offering it to a lot of people at one time, and so you have to set a price on it. But the same concept of thinking about the value it's going to create for the customer. So I would agree with John. I mean, just the fact that you created something that's going to help somebody either get a job or get a promotion, that's worth more than $10.
Yeah, and I was actually talking to a lady a couple weeks ago, and she said that she saw a 3 times increase in resume submission responses since she's changed her resume to do what I did. But I don't know if I'm pricing it right, and I don't know how to market it too. Does marketing fit in with the art of value, or how do you handle those types of situations?
Well, it certainly can fit in, particularly when you're dealing with a product. And pricing is just kind of part of that marketing mix. The one thing that I say about pricing is if you want to learn to price well, you have to experiment. You have to try things. And so, for example, trying to offer the product at different prices and see which one gets the most sales. That's a simple tool, right? But you can actually price a product too low. You can price it too high. I think that what you did was a great idea. You found somebody who actually knew the area we were creating the product for and understood that customer, and you said, hey, here's the product. What do you think? And part of the feedback you got was you're pricing too low. What John did in the example you used is he thought about what is the value that it's going to create for the customer. Whenever you focus on that, generally you're going to wind up pricing higher. Obviously, with products, you've got to be aware of what is the competition. But in the online space where you've got so many of these information products, I don't think it's highly likely that somebody who's looking at your product is going to be looking at another that's the same. It might happen, but because a lot of these products are sold to kind of an audience, almost a fan base or a tribe, I think you can really just focus on what is the value that you're creating for that customer and then price that accordingly. The other thing I would do with pricing on a product is look for a way to offer more than one price for the product. So maybe you offer a base level and then you're able to offer, some type of a deluxe or a premium or an upgrade version. Add something else to that package. There's tons of ways you can do. So I think experimenting, offering the product in more than one way, asking for advice from people who know your customer, and actually talking to your customers. Michael Hyatt is really great about this. He recently did, it was like a 60-something question survey on his site, asking his customers what they wanted, what were the things that he was doing they liked, what were the things that he was doing they didn't like, asking for their feedback. So all of those, I think, go into setting a good price.
What do you think about, I think it's Derek Halpern that calls it the bonus sandwich. What are your thoughts on that as how they relate to value? Right.
So Derek talked about the bonus sandwich at the platform conference, if I remember correctly. And his idea is that you want to create your product is the meat, but then you want to add a bonus on the top to be the top bread, and you want to add another bonus on the bottom to be the bottom bread. I think he's dead on, because the reason he was recommending this is, and you see this a lot online, is people setting a price and then discounting the product. And
yeah, I did that too.
Yeah, creating the illusion to the customer that you're getting a better deal because, hey, it might be 50, but you can get it for 35 right now.
Yeah.
The problem is when you discount things, it affects the customer's perception of value. And so Derek's suggestion, and I completely agree, is set the price at 50 and then add in a couple of extra things. Throw in an ebook, throw in, a free coaching session, quote unquote. Add things to it that increase the value for the customer so they're willing to pay that higher price. I think setting a price and discounting it, now I know it's a popular thing online. I don't think it's ever going to go away, but I definitely agree with Derek. I think discounting starts you down a road of essentially devaluing yourself, devaluing your product, and puts your customer in that mindset too.
Yeah, because I actually offered a pay what you want model and offered this toolkit, normally $30 or whatever, for $1, and nobody took it. And I think that does go back to that perceived value of, well, if it's $30, I'm going to get a lot of benefit. Same thing for $1. Yeah, I don't know. So I think that's a good point. It's interesting, the psychology of it, but that's why we're talking about Derek, because he's the psychology guy.
Right. And there is a lot of psychology that goes into pricing. The psychology I think that's most important is what you, the provider, think of your product. If you don't believe in it, then nothing else matters. You've actually got to believe that you create value. You got to believe this product is going to help your customer. Now, you want to go the next step and actually try to understand from their perspective what is the value it's going to create, but you can't really understand, appreciate, or even discover the value from their angle if you don't feel like it's valuable. And not always, but a lot of times when people have a pricing question, it starts with their own beliefs about what it is they're selling.
Do you have a good question that always helps you get to the core of being able to provide value, one that just really cuts down to the need or the desire that you can help them with?
Sure. One of my favorite questions is, what is this project or product going to allow you to do that you can't do now?
That's a good question, because that would reveal a lot, because it's not a yes or no question. I like that.
And that's right. The questions need to be open-ended. And that's one of the things about pricing based on value is it forces you to ask great questions, because you have to have great information to be able to understand the value and to set a better price. And so learning to ask a question 2 or 3 ways, learning how to ask a follow-up question to go deeper, and also being comfortable with a pause. A lot of times when I ask that question, I will not say anything. I would just ask the question and let it hang there. And I will wait until they either start to answer it or they come back with some kind of answer of, I don't understand the question, or why did you ask that? Or, but be comfortable with silence.
Yeah, because silence isn't always a negative thing. I'm the type, if someone asks me a question that's a really good question, I'll sit there and I'll think about it and prepare, what I really want to say. And if you were the type that didn't wait, you would interrupt my thought process. And so that's a really good piece of advice that I think more people should think about when they ask a question. Just ask it and wait, and then see what they can come back with.
And sometimes your customer might be confused by the question, but then they will eventually say something to that effect, and then that gives you an opportunity to re-ask the question, to reframe the question, to go deeper. Sometimes I may even have to suggest something to a customer. So if somebody has trouble answering that question, I may say, so for example, are you planning to grow the company? Is this system going to help you scale? Or are you trying to increase sales? Are you trying to reduce cost? Are you trying to increase productivity, be more effective? Are you trying to enter a new market? All of those kinds of things. I'll just say, hey, I think this may be why you're doing this, or this may be what you're going to get out of this. Am I right on that, or am I wrong? The idea that it's always easier for somebody to edit something than it is to create it. If you throw out an idea and let them edit it, it's another great way to help start that conversation.
Awesome. Well, Kirk, being the Empowered podcast, you may or may not have guessed that there would be a question about empowering other people. So my first question for you is, what does the word empower mean to you?
I think empower implies two things. One, a mindset, and two, a plan. If you have a mindset to do something and then you have a plan to do that, you're empowered to go do that. I think what a lot of people want to do is actually empower other people. And so when you're trying to empower other people, number one, you're trying to help them achieve a certain mindset. And two, then based on that mindset, create a plan for some type of action to shoot for some kind of result.
Okay, so how do you empower other people?
In general,
or what is the best way to?
Can you give me a context maybe?
Okay, here's one. How do you empower your customers?
Okay. I try to ask really great questions because great questions provoke thought and provoke ideas that the customer may not have thought of. In fact, I even try to throw out ideas that may not be thinking of. I try to help take them beyond where their thought process is right now to get them to think. Sometimes when customers have a conversation with me, they're very short term. I want to try to help them think long term, but really just trying to help them to see things from a different perspective, to give them a different perspective, to give them the ability to look at something in a way that they haven't looked at it before. To me, that's very empowering. One of the things I tell my customers is, if you're coming to me looking for great answers, I probably don't have them. But if you're looking for great questions, those I have. 9 times out of 10, the customer has the answer. They just need somebody to ask great questions to help facilitate it, to help them develop it so that it can flourish.
So when you decided to do what you're doing now, and you've started your own software company, you have changed your pricing model, what types of resistance did you face when you decided to go in these types of directions?
Several types of resistance. I think the first resistance was my own fear. It's a big deal to change your business model. To say, you know what, starting today with all new customers, we're doing it differently. There's fear that you have to go up against, and you really just have to ignore the fear and proceed on. So I think fear was number one obstacle. Number two was just learning how to be confident in that business model. It's one thing to say something to a customer and then just kind of wait to see if it sticks. It's another thing to know that that's the way you do business and that's the way you can best help the customer. And so going as far as to say, I'd love to work with you, but if you don't want to do business that way, we may not be the best fit. A friend of mine in the value pricing community says, you're looking for customers who believe what you believe. Well, they're not going to believe it if you don't believe it. So fear, believing it yourself, the hard work of learning a new vocabulary. Value pricing it's a different way of thinking. Value pricing it's a business model. It's also a belief system. I mean, when I say a belief system, I have a very clear view about hourly billing. It's not good for anybody. And that's part of my belief system. But I didn't believe that at first. I basically had to listen to somebody else. I go, I think that makes sense. And I'm willing to take a risk to see if it's true. And I found out it's true through my experience. But at first, I didn't know that. So those are three things that I think I encountered. The other thing was just, some customers, especially existing customers, weren't sure why the switch. Why would we change something if we've been doing it this way for so long? So yeah, there was resistance. There was even resistance in my own software community. There were people who knew I was making the switch, and they're like, "Why would you do that? Hourly billing is fine. Why would you change?" And so there was actually resistance from my peers as well.
What did you tell those customers because it seems like you make more money when you're value pricing. What did you tell the customers when they asked that question?
I would basically tell them the reason we're changing is because I realize we're focusing on the inputs, not the output. Value pricing, I want to focus on the result for the customer. And if I'm focusing on that, number one, I think the customer is going to have a better outcome. Number two, I think we're going to do better work for the customer because our interests are aligned.
I guess when you start on the value and the end result you're focused on the end result, not the nuts and bolts that help you get there. I hadn't thought of it like that before.
Yeah, the inputs don't matter. They're irrelevant. At least they should be irrelevant. If the customer's focused on my inputs, their focus is on the right thing or on the wrong thing. And sometimes I actually have to have a conversation to see if I can help shift their focus to the outputs. And that's generally fairly easy to do if you kind of talk about what are they wanting to achieve? Why are they buying this in the first place?
How would you argue? I have a set list of questions that I try to run through at the end, and you're giving me other stuff to talk about. How would you respond to the question then, or the comment that the ends justify the means? Because if you're not focused on the means, just the ends, what are your thoughts around that?
Why does the customer care about the means? Why does it matter? As long as I'm not doing anything illegal, which I'm not, right? But it shouldn't matter. To me, in my mind, if I can actually do it faster, better, however I do it is irrelevant, as long as I achieve the result they want and I'm not doing anything that is illegal, immoral, those kind of things. And specifically here, we're talking about professional services, hourly billing. The hours just do not matter. They're irrelevant. It has nothing to do with the result the customer's trying to achieve. And
I guess whether you're billing per project versus hourly, you're still doing the same tasks. I see what you mean.
You might be. I mean, one of the things that value pricing also encourages me to do is, if the best match for a customer and myself when I'm value pricing is something that's high value to them that I can deliver very easily, that's a win-win, because the customer's getting the high value they want, and I'm actually going to be more profitable because I can deliver it quickly, so those are the ideal matches. They're not always that way, but it forces you to look at it from that perspective. The one thing I don't like about hourly billing, or at least one thing I don't like, is the fact that there's too much guesswork on the customer's side. If you're billing by the hour, there's always uncertainty for the customer about, is this really going to take as long as they said it's going to take? And how's that going to affect my bill? It even affects how the customer will interact with you. They will actually not tell you things they want because they're scared how it's going to affect their bill.
Oh, yeah. I can relate to that because I've been on both sides of that. What does a typical day look like for you, Kirk?
Right now, it's an interesting time. I'm actually splitting my day between two businesses. So I still run Mighty Data, which is my software company. But at the same time, I have launched and I'm working on growing Art of Value. So typically, I get up in the morning between 5 and 6. Some mornings I'll go work out. I may just, go into the office. If I have a project, a deadline that day, I may just go in and, start working. But generally, I reserve my mornings. I generally right now don't do any meetings till at least 9 o'clock. And as far as customer meetings, I actually prefer to keep those wait till 11 o'clock in the day, so that I have a good block of time in the morning to focus on the things that are most important, whether it's for Mighty Data or Art of Value. Generally from 11 to 3 is when I do most of my external calls with customers. And then when I get to 3 in the afternoon, I work from home, and I don't generally schedule any outside customer calls after 3 o'clock. And that's simply because my kids come home at 3. And so I want to be able to greet them when they come home. I also don't want to be on the phone with a customer when my kids are coming in and want to talk to me and all that kind of thing. So I kind of divide my day that way into mornings reserved for internal projects, the middle of the day for external meetings, and then the end of the day goes back to internal projects.
What are you doing today that will keep you moving forward tomorrow?
Well, probably talking with you on the podcast.
That works too.
In all seriousness, one of the things I'm doing right now on Twitter is I'm right now just doing a lot of reading of articles on pricing and value pricing, and I'm trying to share 3 or 4 articles each day from my Twitter feed. And so that's keeping me moving in multiple ways. 1, it's increasing my knowledge. 2, I'm linking to content that I think is valuable. So for people who are interested in this topic, who are following me, they can read that as well. I think that's helping to grow the audience that I want to serve from RW. So that's one thing in particular that I'm doing each day, and it's kind of interesting. I've had to kind of set up a workflow for how do I do that? How do I discover the articles? How do I read them? How do I decide what comment I'm going to make about them? And I've kind of had to set up a workflow for that. But that's one thing that is helping move me forward each day. Do
you do like a Google alert type thing on certain keywords, or do you mind sharing?
Not for that. I've basically found kind of 3 or 4 different sources. I've got a couple Twitter searches that I do. I found newsletters in this space where they kind of aggregate content. I also have found, some blogs that tend to write about these topics fairly often, and so I've got them set up in Feedly. So several different ways. No one source in particular. It's kind of 3 or 4 together that kind of allow me to find things, and it's fun because I'm stumbling across new things all the time, finding somebody else who has a different perspective, somebody else who's been talking about this for a while that I never ran into before.
Yeah, and it's a great way to connect. That's one of the things that has really helped the traffic increase of my blog, is not out of a desire to just straight get traffic, but to really connect with and meet people who are doing similar things. So I like that idea too. Since you've decided to face your fears and charge forward, you've changed your pricing model, you're starting this new brand for yourself, Art of Value. What have you stopped doing?
I've stopped watching TV completely.
Not even Castle? I'm a huge Nathan Fillion fan. That's what I watched right before this.
It's funny. I stopped watching TV on the television set a long time ago, but I would watch shows online. I've completely stopped doing that. I've replaced that with more important activities, whether it's listening to podcasts, reading articles, reading a book, listening to audiobooks. So that's one of the big things. I think the other thing is it's forced me to think more carefully about what I say yes to. And I still think I say yes to things I shouldn't. I'm trying to practice on being more selective on the things I agree to do, on the things that somebody may invite me to participate in something, and saying, is that really something that not that it's not important, but is that the most important thing? So I would say not watching TV and practicing saying no.
Nice. Any podcast that you would recommend?
Probably my favorite podcast right now is Ray Edwards. The technical quality is incredibly high. I mean, it sounds like a radio show, and it should, because Ray comes out of the radio broadcast industry, but also his content. He mixes together business and his beliefs, and I find that incredibly valuable because I share, a common belief system with him. I think his motto is prosperity with a purpose. And so he and I agree on a lot of things as far as the idea that successful in business, then you are actually able to do more good in this world. And so I love his show. Other shows that I've been listening to recently that I've discovered, Amy Porterfield's show. I actually discovered her show because she spoke at the Platform Conference. Of course, Cliff Ravenscraft, his show, is, I think, one that anybody who does podcasts listens to. There's also another show that I discovered recently. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's by Doug Turpinning, I think. But Doug and his wife are doing a show together as co-hosts, and they're talking about how do you be intentional about making friends and having great relationships. That's one that I've discovered recently that I've also enjoyed. But I probably got 25 podcasts that I keep on, my podcast app. Every once in a while, that gets up to 40, and I have to go through and start selectively deleting.
Well, hopefully the Empowered Podcast will make it on your list whenever we launch at the end of, at the time of this recording, it's it's 11, 12, 13, and I'm planning on launching at the end of this week, so November 15th, 2013. Hopefully mine makes it onto your list too.
I look forward to it, at least to listen to this. can't talk. At least to listen to this episode, if none other, right?
Exactly. How do you unwind and relax?
Wow. Not very well. We know
you're not watching TV.
Not very well, and not often enough. I get enjoyment out of doing things, so not enough. But probably just slowing down. I think that's the thing. Just going out in nature. If I can go for a walk or actually go spend some time outdoors, particularly without my phone, or at least not paying attention to it. Just slowing down really, and getting away from all the technology. I think that's one thing. I actually enjoy reading. I actually enjoy business books. I think that's something I would do even if I wasn't an entrepreneur, but that's just fun with me. Spending time with my kids, that's huge, and that's one of those things that I'm trying to be more and more intentional about. And I think that's probably part of it with, at least at this point where they are right now, most of my free time is focused on them and their activities. So as they get older, eventually leave the house, I'm sure I'll get back to some other things. But I would say right now it's just trying to be intentional.
Awesome. What was the last movie you saw?
Oh, wow. I don't get out to movies that often. Gosh. It may have been, I think there were two movies I saw at the beginning of the summer. I think one was the new Star Trek Into Darkness, and I think the other one was maybe Iron Man 3. So that's been a while. That's 6 months or more. I don't get out to see them very much.
It doesn't sound like it. I was half expecting you to say something like The Crumps or whatever kids are watching.
Well, now that you mentioned that, yes. Let's see. I saw, trying to remember what these are. Despicable Me 2. What was the Pixar movie that came out this summer? Can't remember what it was. But anyway, yeah.
You're definitely asking the wrong person.
Yeah. Whatever those kids movies were that came out this summer, I saw them all.
All right. Final question, Kirk. What is one tip or piece of advice that you can give people like me who are just starting out?
Don't be scared to try something new. When you're starting out, it's one of the best times to make mistakes because fewer people are watching and you can recover from mistakes easier. The more you build a platform, the more your audience grows. If you do make a mistake, it's going to be noticed more. And so experiment, whether it's with your pricing, your product offerings, your vocabulary, the topic you're blogging on, questions that you ask, experiment. It's part of figuring out what your business is, what you have to offer, is by trying different things.
Awesome. Kirk, where can we connect with you online?
Well, the website is artofvalue.com. I'm also on Twitter at artofvalue. Those are probably the two best places to find me. You can also find more contact information on the contact page on our website.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending an hour with me. It was great meeting you in Dallas, and I had an awesome time chatting with you tonight.
Ellery, it was a pleasure. Again, thanks for having me on the show.
If you've listened to this episode and Kirk has convinced you, like he has me, to focus on the value instead of the price, would you send him a tweet at Art of Value on Twitter? You can also find his Twitter handle on empoweringthe80%.com/EP15, as in Empowered Podcast 15. Kurt and I had a chance to hang out a little bit at New Media Expo, and I'm really excited to have gotten to know him a little bit better. And, it goes back to what I've talked about a couple of times on earlier podcasts, the value of going to these conferences. The content is great, but the connections really can take your personal life and your professional life and your business to the next level. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Empowered Podcast. If you loved this chat with Kirk, will you leave me a review in iTunes at empoweringthe80%.com/iTunes. And before I go, here is a taste of what's coming up on our next episode, which was recorded live at the Podcast Pavilion at New Media Expo. Until next week.
What I realized was, oh, here's where my weaknesses are. Productivity for a lot of the time is either to help you make the best of leveraging your strengths as well as covering for you over your weaknesses. And when you are doing both of those, then you start to get really good results.